So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make an emotional guitar instrumental from scratch. So to get started, I set the BPM to 120, right-click and select Create MIDI region. Now we'll need to open the piano roll to start writing our melodies, and to open, double-click on the MIDI. To close, double-click again, or click on the editor's button once to open and once to close. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's open the piano roll. So for this beat, I've decided to use the C major scale. I don't memorize the scale, so what I do is have the notes in the piano roll as a reference. To do this, I add a note beside each key where I'll be writing my chord progression. So press Command and click with your pointer tool. You can also do this with a pencil tool, and with the pencil tool, you just click and it adds a note in for you. I usually like to turn the note labels on so I can see the notes. To do that, go over to View and select Note Labels. Once that's done, I'm going to select all these notes, go to the left side, Scale Quantize, and choose my scale. And as I've mentioned, this instrumental is going to be in C major. So I select C and major. Now here's the C major scale. Now that I have that, I'm going to start writing my chord progression, which is going to be 16 bars long. This is my second instrumental, and it's actually already done. I'm just going to show you how I made it from scratch. It's a simple guitar instrumental, not a lot of effects. I didn't think it really needed a lot of effects, so I kept it simple. Before you start, choose an instrument you want to use. I like to start with piano and change the instruments after, once I've written my chord progression, melodies, and my bass. I just find it easier to hear the melodies with the chords and bass together. So to do this, go to the library, and in the search bar, I type in search for the piano I want to use. I then close the library so I have more room to work with. I used a simple TRIAD for my chord progression, nothing too complex. And a TRIAD is made up of the root, the third, and the fifth, so you're just skipping the notes in between. It doesn't really matter which note you want your root note to be, it can be any note within the scale. So for my first chord, I selected D as my root note. Then I added a third note and a fifth note. To create that sad emotion, I went from high to low. Then I copied my first set of chord and used that for my fourth set of chord. And because I wanted a 16-bar long melody, I made a copy of these notes to lengthen my chord progression. So select to copy, press Option, and drag. So here it is. Now I'm going to make a few copies of this chord progression because I'll be needing it later. To copy, press Option, click, then drag. I'm also going to silence the track, so select the on and off button and hold down. Now I'm going to minimize all of these copies and leave them at the top. To select all, click to select the top, press Shift, click and select the bottom, then drag the track's divider line to the top. I usually like starting with chord progressions because they really help with my creative process. They make it easier for me to write my melodies and my bass. Also, melodies just sound so much better with chords. So here's my chord progression. I'm just going to move it one octave higher and use C3 to B4 to write my melodies in. I'll need a copy of my reference notes, so I copy and paste them up top. To create that sad emotion for my first melody, I started from the top again, worked my way down, then up, and repeated the same shape or form. I added more D4 notes just before the end of the melody to build that emotion, then ended the melody with some low and high notes to build that anticipation, which is going to lead to the chorus. So this is what the melody sounds like. Now I'm going to write my bass, and all I did was take some of these notes from the chords to make my bass. As I was making my bass, I listened to make sure they sounded good with the melodies, so choose notes that you think will sound good with your melodies. Now let's have a listen to the bass. I made a second melody for this instrumental to resolve the intensity built in the beginning of this beat. I started with mid notes this time and worked my way to the top with higher notes, then to the lower notes. But I'm just going to speed up this section of the video so it doesn't get too boring and end up being too long. Now that I have my melodies, chord progression, and bass, I'm going to change the instruments. So once again, open the library and type the instrument that you want. For my melodies, I chose high-rise pluck, and for my bass, I chose smooth funk bass. So go through some of the sounds that Logic has and find ones that you like. Now let's listen to the melodies and bass together with the new instruments. The next thing I did was build the structure for this instrumental. Click on the Global Tracks button tool, and then click on the plus symbol to add a marker. To remove the other trackers, right-click and uncheck the tracker. Now that I have the structure for this instrumental, I'm going to work on the arrangement. But first, I want to make a simple melody for the chorus. I took some of the notes from the second melody. I kept the notes that started at the beginning of each chord in the melody section, then kept some of the notes in the chord progression section. Play around with the notes, remove and add back the notes, adjust the length of the notes, play it and listen to find notes that you think will sound good together with the melodies and the bass. And because I was going for an emotional guitar instrumental, I used a guitar for this melody. So here's the third melody with the guitar. Now on to the arrangement of this instrumental. I made some changes to the notes for each section of the instrumental so it tells a story. I added some layers so it sounds fuller while at the same time ensuring I leave enough room for the singer. I used the first melody for the bridge and I used the second melody for the interlude. I then layered both melodies with a flute instrument and made some slight changes to the notes just like this. I used the third melody for the intro, the outro, the chorus, and the verse. I made some changes to the notes for each of these sections so they don't all sound the same. I also changed the instrument for the intro and the outro. For the third chorus, I duplicated the notes and moved them up 2 octaves, making it sound higher, adding intensity. I used the bass throughout the entire instrumental. Again, so they're not all the same, I layered the bass by duplicating it, changing the instrument, adding rhythm to the bass by adding notes, as well as shortening and lengthening some of the notes. This is what the bass sounds like with the changes. The next thing I did was layer the third melody and change the instrument, then made some changes by removing notes that I didn't need. For the outro, I moved some of the notes around and then resolved it with a D note. I then added drums and claps for this instrumental using loops. For my clap, I used Frenzy single clap and used it for the chorus and the verse. I liked the sound of the icy kick beat, so I took this, chopped it, and kept the part that I liked to use for the intro and the chorus. Also, I decided to add a drum break for this instrumental, so instead of a fourth chorus, I changed this section to a drum break. I liked the sound of the reverse kick beat and thought it would go really well with the overall vibe of this instrumental and a good way to transition into the outro. The last thing that I did was add drums, a kick and crash for my transition so each part of the instrumental blend well together. And that is it. This instrumental is done. If you found this tutorial helpful and learned something from it, please click the like button and click subscribe for more tutorials. Let's now listen to the complete instrumental and let me know what you think.